You are listening to The Manual with Mike Sheridan. The opinions expressed here are purely that of the individuals in question and can sometimes be of an adult nature.
You're very welcome to another edition of the Manual podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by John Connor, who is co-founder, co-owner of the Irish Strength Institute. So John is, amongst many, is Conor McGregor's strength and conditioning coach. A lot of the other guys in SBG, and is Carl Frampton, is strength and conditioning coach. Obviously, Carl had an amazing win there a couple of weeks ago, which was a great scrap. It's John, you're very welcome, and thanks so much for coming in. We have the Barbaric Gentleman. Anybody that's been in Barbaric Gentleman, it's a nice little. I always throw it there to the left or to your right and be
I'm familiar with it.
You're familiar with it. We got it. You appeared in the documentary that we made.
How long ago was that now?
It was. I'm training 3 years now.
Is it 3 years?
We started filming 3 years ago.
I was thinking about that today, and I was like, yeah, it's amazing. It's actually funny, like when that was filming, Conor had only fought in Sweden.
He just fought because once I started training with Owen Roddy, I didn't realise at the time, but I was like, yeah, I'm just back from Sweden.
Yeah.
He'd been over there for that whole 60G comments, which was the start of it, and I couldn't get anybody anywhere in a previous publication I worked in, or which we did do some MMA content, but I couldn't get people to really commit to doing MMA stuff.
It's amazing the journey for it. It was funny because Conor's first fight on Sweden was the day of my daughter's christening.
Oh, no way.
And I remember us watching it on a phone in a hotel. I won't say the name, but I remember going up and asking them, could we put it on the telly? And they were like, we don't show that stuff here.
It's hilarious, isn't it?
It's amazing just how, and you probably found that while doing it, you know, and as you said, the whole thing was Barbaric Gentleman. It's like, anyone who fights isn't a thug. Do you know what? And most of the fighters not most of the fighters, but a lot of the fighters are kind of geeky. they're into comic books. They're into Is that not the comment John Kavanagh always makes? It's like the most successful MMA guys are the MMA nerds. They're the guys that hang back after training, discuss sequences, discuss positions, and they're the SWATs. And they're the ones that excel.
Or even look at somebody like Joe Lozon, who's like looks like a computer programmer.
I think he is.
Yeah, he's got. I think he has a background in that or something. He's obviously a very techie guy. If you follow him on the social media,
he's a big time
and he's
gamer,
an absolute animal. Didn't he hold a record for most bonuses, most post fight bonuses?
I think
he's obviously a smart
recently,
guy.
Yeah, he's one of them. I think him and Cowboy Cerrone, I think, are up there for the
loaded
bonuses.
50 and 60 Gs left, right, and centre. But it was kind of a funny story how you started doing the strength and conditioning for SBG. It was kind of by chance, wasn't it?
Well, our first gym was on Richmond Road. It was in a industrial estate there, and there was an MMA club a few doors down from us, and one of the members in that club was Cottle Pendred. So Cottle, being Cottle, always wants the best advantage. So he came into us one day, was speaking to us, and we were like, yeah, we'll do a few sessions. And then he moved over to SBG, and he told John Kavanagh about us. My business partner at the time, well, still at the time, of an extra business partner now, Owen, went to meet John, spoke to John. John was very impressed, and then we started training him. I think that was early 2009, so 7 years we've been involved with training them.
So can you take responsibility for Cottle Pendred taking his shirt off all the time? Is that what you're saying?
I think he would do that anyway.
Any excuse, huh?
Well, he's a genetic freak as well.
The Pendreds are. His brother Porrig is the same.
Yeah.
He's 2 sisters as well. But they're naturally in good shape.
He is a hard working man, but like he responds very fast. But the thing is, like, when we pinch people, that's one of the measurements we use, is even if he's high pinch wise, he still has abs. Yeah. So everyone hates him.
What's that called? It's like, I remember you saying that to me when you broke it down to me. I was a bit of a fat mess, a bit of a chubby mess when I first went to you as well. It was like some people are carb tolerant, and you were able to look at me from doing all the body fat.
I think overall, like, some people can, but I think it's more people are calorie tolerant. Some people can just eat a lot or eat whatever and still be in great shape. And now Cottle, of course, works really hard, but he responds really fast. So you always have, no matter what it is, whether it's fitness, strength, body fat, you'll always have outliers. Yeah. So you'll always have people who are kind of mainly divided into 3 main groups. You'll have, in the bell curve. So most people who respond okay, some people who respond crap, and then other people who respond amazingly well. Like, you can put people on the same strength program, and some people, everything's the same, like the reps, the sets, the amount of times they train per week, but some people will just get stronger a lot faster because, they're genetically able to do that.
So you would have, like, obviously you've got some big name combat athletes and Carl Frampton too. But it's a gym as well. Like it's a
the majority of what we do is we just train regular people.
Yeah.
Like as we say, we train people to look good naked. That's the majority of what you do.
That's on the poster.
Yeah. I don't know if we put that on it, but again, it's yes, our elite level. But the majority of what we do is we just work with normal people who work 9 to 5, who have families and struggle to, sift through so much bullshit information that's out there, and it's just making sense of that for them and fitting it into their lives so that they get results for what they want to do.
Like, I had no idea how, like, previously I'd done ultramarathons, and I kind of went to you going, on Roddy brought me to you, and it was like a case of I would just run for hours and hours on end and I would eat what I wanted. And at that point I was kind of getting to the later end of my 20s, just turning 30, or I think I'd just gone 30, and the metabolism seemed to slow down a little bit, and I had no idea I was out of shape.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is to do with as you get older, you lose more muscle mass.
Yeah.
Even 30s, I'm 35, so it's not that old. But as you get older, you do lose muscle mass, and that's one of the major things for your metabolism slowing down. And people tend to eat the same and then exercise less. So when you combine eating more, loss of muscle mass, and then training less, that's where the fat accumulation comes from. Like, people can respond to training 70, 80, 90 years old, once they keep doing it.
That's nuts.
Yeah, so like
there's so many myths out there about, like macros and cut this out, cut that out. And there's always these diet fads, and it's like consistency is obviously the key.
Consistency is one of the main things. Like Kyle, again, we were talking about earlier, is that he is so good because he's consistent. Like, he says a lot of times, people are like, oh, what are you having? Thinking he has a secret. He doesn't have a secret. He eats well and does it consistently. I think the problem is that with fad diets is most fad diets work because they create a calorie deficit in some way. People lose weight, but they can't maintain it. And like, weight loss is easy. Weight maintenance is hard.
Yeah.
So a lot of people talk about this, is that only about 5% of people, if they lose weight, will keep that weight off. 5%. Like, that's terrible. Like, that's a real, real indication of how bad the fitness industry can be, how poor we are at conveying information to people.
But it seems to be like lots of kind of contradictory information out there, and a lot of the time as well, you see it in the gym constantly. People don't really know what they're doing. We had Fionnuala McHale in here, Dr. Fionnuala in here, and she was saying the same thing. It's like, you see people kind of wandering around and there's no real purpose to what they're doing or how they're doing it. They know they want to be there. They're motivated enough to kind of get up off their arse and pay a gym fee and to go and start training. But it's like they're reading the fitness magazines, and they know what they want to look like, but they don't, and they're willing to work, but they don't know how.
But I think as well as, like you said, they know what they want to look like. I think as well as when you start off, you have to have realistic expectations about your body type. So I can't remember who, I think Sports Illustrated might have done it, and they did I think it was the 2012 Olympics, where they had men and women from every sport in their underwear, or in a big, swimsuit or something like that. And these are the top people, top athletes in the world, like you're talking top 1% of the world's population athletics wise. And they all look very differently, even though they're all in shape. So it's kind of like with people, sometimes if you start out with an unrealistic image, you're going to fail. So it's kind of like you have to figure out, well, where do I sit? And then aim for that. And another thing with, like, probably the biggest problem with the industry is that genetics can play a massive role. Like, if you've amazing genetics, you can make results kind of doing anything. And then steroid use is rampant, especially like in a lot of these people who post pictures of themselves all over the place. Is that steroid use is so common. Can
you tell? Like, I'm in a few gyms, and one of the gyms in particular, I feel like I can tell. I don't know what it is, just from kind of looking at, and they seem to be younger and younger and younger as well.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing now, where it's because I'm in private facilities, I'm not in commercial gyms.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't worked in a commercial gym.
You know exactly who's coming in and who's going out.
Yeah. But it's more standalone, you kind of can, but when you see progression, then you can tell. So if someone walks in and they're like 80 kilos, 15% body fat, and 6 months later they're 110 kilos and 4% body fat, you're kind of like, you can't do that.
It's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
No genetic is that like.
Yeah, there's no one that, unless of course you were 110 kilos, were in a car accident, hadn't trained or something like that. You know, you can have muscle regain, but and it takes a long time. It takes a long. Like I've worked with some, genetic freaks as well, and naturally it takes time. Like you can have sports where you can train intensely, gain a lot, and then you kind of tip along for a while, jump up again, but it's not like you see some people and it just jumps up. And I think that can be part of the problem, is that people look at the outliers and they look at people with great genetics, people who are on steroids, and it could be all three of those things. It could be an outlier that has great genetics that's on steroids, and they're looking at that as what they should achieve, and then they get pissed off when they don't, and then they quit. So no, it's about having realistic expectations as well. And
we're kind of elite athletes, and you would have seen it, I suppose, heavily with the Tour de France, and somebody very famous has come out and admitted to it. Whether they were caught or not, we don't know. But for a lot of these athletes, especially with the endurance stuff, or maybe with if somebody's in a fight camp or something like that, be it boxing, be it MMA, be it whatever it is, they say that it's more for recovery. Like Chael Sonnen said that when he was taking it, he completely held his fucking hands up and was like, "Yep, I did it."
Yeah, he got caught and he was on.
He was on absolutely everything, and he held his hands up.
But it's mainly for recovery. Like I remember, my business partner does work with David Gillick. And I remember David Gillick had an article a few years ago.
Irish Olympic athlete.
Yeah, the 400 metre runner. And he achieved a lot. He was a European indoor champion twice. And he wrote an article about how he went over to train in America, and Tyson Gay was in the same camp. And he was doing the same work as all of those guys. And Tyson would pick up a knock, disappear for a few days, come back, and he'd be back to normal. And so over time, Gillick was just getting worn down because he couldn't do the work needed. Like the number one predictor of success a lot of time is the amount of volume of work you can do. Now, whether that's MMA where you can do more skill work, whether it's weight training where you can just do more sessions, or your average weight per session is higher because you have that recovery, that's what over time will make the difference. So it's just about getting that volume of work in, and recovery is so important to that. So like you can make inroads into it being natural, like,
but it's not going to be the same. Like
it's nowhere near the same.
And if you're under the pressure, you've got contracts, you've got sponsorship deals, whatever you have, and somebody's giving you an alternative in quotation marks.
I can understand why people do it.
Yeah,
you can understand why they do it, because especially in certain sports where, like, take a sport like soccer, you could be the 1,000th best player in the world and you could still be a millionaire. Where if you are number 5 in the world in sprinting, no one knows who you are. Like you probably do okay, but
that's the difference.
You're not retiring. So if someone says, "Well, you when you retire, you're going to have to start coaching or working or have a real job, or you take this and you'll be number 1 and you'll be rich for the rest of your life." You can understand that. What I hate though is, like you see in Sharapova recently, like trying to play off that. I don't know. It's disingenuous
because the sponsorship deals are gone. Like straight away, Nike are gone. Like are back away completely. They back off completely, and so Sonnen owned it. Yeah, Chael Sonnen absolutely owned it.
And you have to respect that to a certain. He's like, and
he kind of came out and held his hands up. He disappeared for a while, did Metamorphosis, and then came back and was like, "Yep, I did all that shit."
Yeah, and as I said, you can understand. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, can't believe it." It's like these people could have dedicated 20 years of their life to this. And it's just a weakness to outperform. They need that, and if other people are on it, you can understand it. But
because there's some fighters now, because the UFC have absolutely cracked down on
brilliant.
it. They've spent millions and millions
and
millions to crack down on it because it's dangerous when it's combat.
Yeah,
somebody can get hurt. Like Victor Belfort was on whatever he was on when he fought Michael Bisping. Now he can only see out one eye. Because he head kicked him in the eye, and whether he would have been able to pull that off or not.
Was that direct from that?
Well, he was on it at the time. He was proving he was on it at the time.
No, I mean,
that's when Bisping, it was. Yeah, it's related to what Bisping says that it's related to. Whether he had issues before or not, who knows? But you see, kind of some athletes now. We don't want to name any names, but there's people who may not have been caught previously who were on it. And who now are kind of nowhere near the athletes that they were previously.
When you look at anyone that came from Pride, no one really did as well when they switched over. Is that coincidence? No. It's like,
but Joe,
even as he said, on the night testing is an intelligence test. because everything has a clearance. Everything has a half-life, so it has a clearance rate. So if I stop this drug on X day, I will be clean for my test. And that's all those guys were doing.
And that's why they're turning up randomly now.
But that's why it was...
Because you're going to be using it in camp to help your body recover.
Like, I think before they brought all this in, failure on the night testing was 1%. 1%, so 1 in 100 guys.
Some Aegis, like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was marijuana.
Yeah.
So
it's recreational, it's not performance enhancing.
I don't even think they should test for that. But then when they started out a competition testing, it's 33%. It was between 25 and 33%. So like 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 were popping. So when you look at that, and then there's certain things like I always talk to the drug testers when I'm at things, and they must think I'm trying to figure stuff out, but it's more like I'm just interested. And it used to be you couldn't test for growth hormone at all, and then it was you could only test for it, but you had to take it within 12 to 24 hours. So in a way the test would have to be lucky. And now I think it's 21 days that it can test for. So when you make these advancements, it's brilliant for the sport.
It's not as easy to get away with as it was.
Yeah, it's brilliant for all sports. It's like, I hate this thing when they say, "Oh, people should just be on everything," and then just compete. I think that's
it's dangerous. Well, it's dangerous.
Yeah, because what people don't realise is that under supervision, steroids are harmless. But the problem is that, especially men, it's like if 10 is good, 100 is 10 times as good. No, it's not that simple. Like there's like bodybuilders.
It's drawing a line and
like you see with bodybuilders, a lot of them die very young because they absolutely smash themselves.
And what is it? Is it major organ failure? Is it liver? Is it?
I think it's just a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Just,
and you can't be walking around at like 2.5% body fat.
Well, a lot of them don't. That's what they're on.
Well,
stage.
not that
they don't
whether they're
walk
not walking around. I mean, but like even for that period of time, and I've seen you at weigh-ins with the lads in SBG, and I'm a Carl Frampton and stuff, and not so much Carl, but like the SBG guys or any MMA fighters, they cut so much weight.
Yeah, I think in MMA, because there's 7 weight classes, and there's 15 in boxing. But I think as well as like when they talk about changing the rules, I don't think they will, because the weigh-in is part of the spectacle now. It's part of the lead up.
10,000 people turning up for a Conor McGregor weighing.
Yeah.
That's more than a lot of the fights, a lot of the fight nights in the UFC. Which is
amazing.
Nuts.
Yeah, so and it's part of the build-up. Like I think Frampton versus Quigg, I think they said, it was 4,000, 5,000 at that weigh-in.
That was a big fight.
Yeah, and I think for the one in Vegas, you're going to get more, because when you're in Vegas, everyone's on holidays, where I think when it was in Manchester, more people are travelling over that day, people are working. So, but like for that, like 4,000 people, and it was some noise at a weigh-in. It was amazing. But like, Carl looks like an anatomy chart the day of a weigh-in. Like he's just one. Again, it's
how much weight would Carl cut?
For this one was his best cut. I know everyone says this is my best camp.
But he felt the best in the camp.
Yeah, and it was again. It just came down to calories. It was. They brought in, I don't even know the name of it, but like just as quickly as that, you're talking about Shane McGuigan's his boxing coach and does a lot of his nutrition, and then Daryl Richards does his strength and conditioning, and I kind of come in the week of the fight and do a lot of treatments, and then if Carl's in Dublin or I'm in Belfast at all, I'll do more treatments on him. Like I think 5 years I'm working with Carl as well, and Shane would have done a lot of courses and stuff that I taught, and then adapted that and moved on. And then he's like, me and Shane would talk a lot about like he's trying stuff, and then I'd be trying stuff, and then seeing how it works on.
He comes across like a very smart guy.
He is like and the thing is I think I don't know whether it's his attitude or just being young. You're willing to learn. Like boxing is,
because he's like 29, isn't he?
No, he's 27.
He's only 27. Oh, that's depressing, John.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Look at what he's achieved at 27. Like.
But like he's always willing to learn, and I think it's I think it's even more, it shows up more in boxing, which, because boxing has been around so long, it's very set in its ways. Where I think MMA is so new, it's constantly kind of adapting, and because you're bringing in so many people from different backgrounds, like wrestlers, then taekwondo, whatever, they all bring something different to the table. So I think that's why it's kind of constantly evolving. And even with stylistically, the recent trend has been more towards strikers who are good at defending takedowns.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's moving more that way. And again, it could swing another way and see what happens.
I would have seen like an obvious move years ago for somebody who boxed just to go into MMA and a little bit of jiu-jitsu, but like just more defending takedowns.
Yeah,
more
it was
anything else.
probably like you were talking about Vitor Belfort. He was probably the first guy who knew 2 disciplines, like
the actual mixed martial arts.
Yeah, he was jiu-jitsu and boxing, where everyone before that was either bums off the street or knew one martial art really well.
Yeah.
And now it's amazing just to see how it grows and the way it's progressing.
And I think the fan base as well has evolved to something much broader, and with that you just kind of get more morons kind of in the mix as well.
Yeah.
And I've had Cottle on the podcast, and I've spoken to Cottle about this as well, and that just these keyboard warriors are just, when it comes to mixed martial arts, and Cottle made a fair point. He was saying it's because that's where the sport kind of starts, where the fans started, because the sport started around the same time as the internet, so they would go to the underground or they would go to wherever to talk about it.
But I think as well as the internet in general, like we were talking about people who commented on that article on the Big Bang, it's like something about the internet just makes people who comment on the internet, there's just something wrong with them a lot of the times. It's like have you not got something better to do? It's like, I always laugh when you see an article about Conor and people will click in to the article and comment on it. It's like, you hate that person and you hate what they're about, but you took the time to maybe not read the article, but click in and write something about it. It's like, come on, get on with your life. There's plenty of people that you don't like or despise, but you don't actively follow them. You just ignore them and try and stay away from what they do.
Like,
it's such a strange thing.
And it's with Conor and I think with Ronda Rousey, and they're the 2 biggest examples of it most recently, because they're the 2 biggest success stories that the UFC have ever had, I think, without question.
Yeah.
And I think in how Ronda was knocked out, and not shaking a hand and all that shit.
I kind of like that though.
Well, she stuck.
She stuck to her
when
guns.
Misha Tate a few years ago, I was one of the people that was like, when Misha Tate got beaten and Misha Tate went to shake her hand and Ronda was like no, and she walked away from her. That seemed cold because she'd lost, and she tried to shake her hand, but Ronda was like, look, at the end of the day, this is me. She said some shit about me. I haven't forgotten that, know.
No, I kind of like that in the sense that sometimes it's like, the build up to the fight. But she was genuinely, if she was in their face, it was because she didn't like them. And I kind of like that. Now, she could have just even given a bit of a handshake. Yeah. But you kind of have to respect her that she was still stuck with her guns and was like, I don't like you. I don't like you. I'm not going to pretend I like you, and walked off. And I think the backlash against her was part of that, but it's
a little insane. So I mean, we'll get to Conor, I think, because it's just happened this past week, and you had an amazing one with Carl the week before. So
that's
it's kind of like
that is level. That's sport at the highest
elite
level.
That is elite athletes at that level. Like, it is kind of nuts. But so Conor, the whole thing was made over Conor's weight. So normally, for anybody who doesn't know, or anybody who's a casual fan, he's held 2 titles at 145 and 155 in Cage Warriors. He's the current 145 champion in the UFC. Was supposed to fight Dos Anjos at 155 for the lightweight title.
Yep.
And Dos Anjos got injured. And now previously in the UFC, the top guys in the UFC have refused to take replacements. So Verdum refused to take a replacement when Cain Velasquez pulled out. John Jones refused to fight Chael Sonnen. Yeah. He fought him in the end anyway at another point. But on short notice when Dan Henderson had to pull out. So Conor McGregor taking 2 fights. He did it with Chad Mendes last summer, and he did it again with Nate Diaz. It's an absolutely nuts thing to do for anybody in the UFC in that context.
Yeah, but I think, okay, so it's funny, this week I've been tagged in a few posts about the weight.
Yeah.
Conor fought at the weight he walks around at. Always. Conor's been that size since... Okay, so Conor got injured, was that August 24th?
When he fought Max Holloway.
Yeah, 2013 or 2014?
I think it was 2013.
3 years ago, yeah. So 2013. And Conor was always a professional about how he approached things, and it was amazing from then. This is when he got into movement. This is when he got way more into strength and conditioning. And if you look at his body has transformed a lot since then. And his big thing is that you look at his arse is bigger, which is more power. His hamstrings are a lot bigger. His lower back is a lot bigger. From the front,
everywhere he's generating power. Yeah.
Anywhere that's gonna, like, his posture's much better, his flexibility is much better. So, like, he's a man who, when we first started working with him, had okay flexibility. and now has amazing flexibility. Why? Because he's worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And his strength and conditioning is way better. So you're talking, when he came into the Dublin fight, was probably the biggest he'd ever been in his career to that point, right? And he's
I remember saying that to you around, and he just looked bigger.
Because he lifted more.
Yeah.
He lifted more.
And his posture was different.
Yeah, he, as I said, if you look at him, his arse is bigger, his hamstrings are bigger, I should say his glutes are bigger than his arse. It's real Irish, isn't it? His lower back is like, they're called the erector spinae, which sit on the side of the spine. All that stuff was a lot more there, right? As you said, his posture's much better, and he's kind of sat at that weight since. So we did loads of training from when he was injured to when he got back into Dublin.
Rehabbing that knee, yeah.
Just rehabbing, but just everything. He became obsessed. Like it was something he kind of did because he had to, and then it was like he brought it to another level. Okay, as I said, his flexibility is something he did, but then he like the week of the leading up to the Mendes fight, you see him in the octagon doing the front splits. That was like unbelievable. But like he progressed massively. So he weighed in at 168, right? So you're talking that's 76 kilos, right? He was probably 1 or 2 kilos heavier than he was fighting in Dublin, fighting in Boston, fighting in Vegas against Poirier. I wasn't there for July against Mendes, so I don't know. Aldo, again, was probably the same. So he was only like 1.5, maybe 2 kilos heavier than he was in those other fights.
So the argument that the weight affected Conor's performance,
no.
It's
I can understand where people are coming from, because
you look bigger at the weigh-in. You look so much bigger at the weigh-in.
So what happens is when you put on more weight, it can change your proprioception. So, and it can take a long time for your proprioception to catch up with like your body. Okay, so that's why when you're training young athletes, you want them to get to their competitive weight as young as possible, so they've more time at that weight. Okay, but with Conor, that's what he trains at all the time. So if anything, because he didn't have to do a weight cut, he should have been fitter. And like I heard John Kavanagh talking about it, you never see Conor tired. You never see Conor tired sparring. We can make him tired in the gym, but that's because we're absolutely smashing him.
Yeah.
And I think it's like we did more fitness work for this because we could. Because he was so tight on the way for 145, we always had to be careful about what we did, because we couldn't do too much, because we don't want him putting on size, because it just makes it harder to get down there. So we were able to do a little bit more for this camp compared to previous camps. It's the fittest I've seen him, and I'm not just saying like, this is the best camp we've ever had.
Yeah.
It was none of that. He was at his peak condition going into that fight. He had no weight cut, so there was no drain from there. He, like he said it himself, I've seen it in loads of guys. You load up and you get tired.
Somebody broke down. Somebody on Reddit MMA broke down the shots that Conor took in a GIF. All the shots that Conor landed in the round and a half, or just under 2 rounds, whatever it was. And Conor lit Nate Diaz up.
Unbelievable.
If you watch those shots back in slow motion, he connected 25 times at least. Heavily connected 25 times at least. And Nate Diaz's face after, if you were to ask anybody who won that fight.
Yeah. I don't like that as a thing of...
I know, but...
Say GSP...
Oh, absolutely,
always marked up real easy.
That,
Carl Frampton a lot of times marks up really easy.
But it was obvious that Conor was landing a lot on that side of Nate's face.
Yeah, I actually didn't have... I was saying to someone today, it's like the general election. I've probably read 5 minutes of that in this week, and I've probably watched about 12-15 hours on stuff on Conor and all that sort of stuff. But it would have been... I didn't actually see the stats on it. But it's like Nate Diaz can take a punch. He has been able to take a punch. Like, he's only ever been stopped once, and even then it was like he probably might have kept going.
Could have been an early stoppage.
Yeah, like the ref was right to stop it, but Diaz is the type of guy that probably could have got back into the fight.
It would have looked like he was fine anyway. Yeah.
But so we can take a shot, and I think sometimes it's like you're hitting someone, you're like, oh, I'm going to hit you now. And maybe you load up more, and it just wears you down. I was at an event in November up in the waterfront, and the guy knocked the fighter he was fighting down in the first round, So I was like, great, I'm gonna finish this here and now, and chased him and went for it in the first round, and then took probably 3 or 4 rounds to get back into his rhythm because he was just so tired.
Do you think that's true? Like, it was another one, I think it was, again, Sonnen that said it, where he's like, if you look for the knockout, you'll never win a decision. Do you think that's true? In a lot of cases, in the majority of cases.
But you see it sometimes when people will rock a fighter and they'll empty their load, basically.
Yeah.
They're just like, right, I'm gonna end this now. And then they're exhausted. Or sometimes, you've seen it with, and it's a different situation, but something similar is that with Tate, when she had Holmes back in the
so
second
durable.
round,
Yeah,
she didn't burn her arms out, but in the 5th round she just went, screw it, I'm going for it. And you could see it, like in the second round she was controlled. She knew, right, if she gets out, I have another 3 rounds to go, I don't want to burn my arms out. But in the 5th round she went for it. But if she had done that sort of exertion in the second round, she probably would have lost the fight because she would have been too tired.
It's almost
even
like
though she's super fit. So it's like in the Olympics, it's amazing. Like, say, the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 800 meters are based. They're very close to the human body's energy systems. You can't sprint for 800 meters. It's impossible. You know. So, and that's kind of maybe what Conor tried to do a little bit, was sprint for 800 meters. And, you know, he got it 400 meters into it and then couldn't. You know, so he and again, it's the thing about it is with Conor and John, they'll detach themselves emotionally from the fight, and it's like an equation to them. It's like, okay, we put in this here, this was the result. What do we need to change here to change that result? And they'll just analyze it and change and grow. Like, if you look at the fighter Conor was when he lost to Joseph Duffy to the fighter he is today, it's a world of difference. And now he will be even better. He's going to come back better. It's actually, in some ways, it's good because you can put money on him to win the lightweight belt and get better odds.
But it's funny because it's like having some sort of insight into, like with yourself and my own Roddy, and like occasionally I've done a couple of things with John Kavanagh as well, and it's that they're so confident. It's that when Conor's in camp or whoever is fighting. I remember when it was Aldo, and there was no question with talking to the guys in Conor's camp that he was like, nah, Conor's going to knock him out. There was no even like that confidence was there. And it's obviously, you know, based in a very real place of experience and seeing what he does on a daily basis in the gym. So, but I mean, in terms of the loss, he couldn't have handled the loss any better. He stood up like a man. He went out. He did every single interview. He, you know, didn't make any excuses.
You could see, like, he was massively disappointed.
He didn't make any excuses.
You hope so.
But you see fighters losing, not turning up to the press conference. There's excuses made, whatever it is. Kind of went to that press conference. He took every question. He didn't, and as he is in, like he says, he's as humble in victory as he is in defeat. Yeah. You know, he held his hands up and he was like, Nate was the better man tonight. Yeah.
And I think as well as though he did lose in the end, but he won. He was winning till he lost.
He was.
You know, he was winning till he lost. I know that's, you know, it's silly, and that's
like Nate having his back. That image, like going in for that rear naked choke, is something that's reverberated around the world. But the round and a half, 2 rounds before that, that wasn't the whole story.
Diaz is one of the best guys on his feet in that division. So, you know, Conor picked him apart. Really, he got caught. He got caught with a heavy shot, which probably would have then and there would have stopped most people. And
he's had shots before from Aldo. He's had them from Chad Mendes. He had a heavy overhand right from Chad Mendes. Yeah, and was fine. Barely looked like
it. It looked like barely.
He shrugged it off. And
so
Chad Mendes is not.
He does have a great chin, but like when everyone can get caught, like so with Frampton had never been knocked down in his amateur or his pro career, and got knocked down twice in the first round in his fight in El Paso, and that's the big difference between boxing and MMA. You can swarm them. Like in boxing, you can tie them up, bide your time, get back to your corner, and maybe fight. And Carl is such an amazing fighter that he can fight going forward, he can fight going back, he can fight on the inside, fight on the outside. So he was able to readjust, and then I think he won like 9 of the next 11 rounds.
So watching that fight,
so
it was a schooling then after that.
Yeah, so his boxing skills were amazing.
At a certain point, though, and maybe that was the case there with Carl, did he need a little bit of adversity Do Carl need a bit of adversity?
Yeah,
Does
but
Conor need a bit of
it's
adversity?
probably. I think sometimes you go in and you think I'm going to win this, where and some like you need your confidence, but it's that line of where does confidence become? You slip into a bit of I'll be all right.
Yeah, as anybody would.
Yeah, and I think, and again, maybe it's hard to tell because you're not there, you're not in there, you don't experience what Conor's experienced. It's maybe it's like, as I said, I think I said it earlier, it's like he hit him and I was like, oh, I stood up, I'll hit you now and put you down, and that can just you never know where it's like his distance management was brilliant for most of it.
He had that reach advantage. Diaz is 6 foot. That's
it's a huge
straight away.
thing.
Conor's never fought anybody that big before.
But even still, it's like what I find hilarious is like people are talking about Conor's jiu-jitsu game because he got choked out. But Diaz is one of the best jiu-jitsu guys in the UFC, and
Lorenzo Gracie he trains with
Caesar Gracie.
Yeah,
he has his black belt under, and he's probably a black belt as long as Conor's.
Joe doing a stand up with Joe Schilling. He's got
he's got, but. Was it Henner Gracie, I think, or Huron Gracie? The Gracie Breakdown did it on it, and when they actually get into the details of it, it was amazing the level Conor was at, but Diaz was just a fraction more, and that's what makes a difference. And then when you're eating shots as well, that's a common saying. It's like a black belt can turn into a white belt when you start punching them. So I don't think that happened to Conor, but they see this. Diaz used his jiu-jitsu and his punching to set it up brilliantly. And Conor did so many things right to get out. Considering he was rocked, considering he was tired, he did amazingly well. And as I said, is that you can see how good his jiu-jitsu was at the end of the first round, where he was taken down and he swept Diaz with X-guard, which is rarely used in MMA. Ends up on top.
Fight could have finished there. It could have, because Conor was on top. He was landing heavy shots.
He was landing shots. He was passing his guard. Yeah. There's high level jiu-jitsu there. So again, it's like I think people are too one way or the other. People don't like nuance. It's like he's either the best in the world or either he's the worst in the world. It's
Nobody cares about the semantics.
Yeah. People don't like nuance. People don't like to look at the detail.
Eddie Bravo and Joe Rogan spoke about it, and I've kind of avoided. I don't know. I'd listen to a lot of the fight podcasts and listen to a lot of that stuff, but. For whatever reason, I was like, I don't want to hear the bullshit. I'm sick of hearing the bullshit. I have an insight into what goes on in the camps and what he does in the training, and I don't need to get frustrated listening to that shit.
Yeah.
But I listened to Bravo and Rogan talked about it for half an hour, and they were just kind of analysing 196. And Bravo was saying, look, Conor's jiu-jitsu was awesome. He's come into 10 Planet, and Eddie Bravo, who's like different level, kind of pioneer of jiu-jitsu, as much as the Gracies in a lot of ways in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, in terms of no-gi stuff or whatever. You can argue either way there. I know he's fought at Metamorphosis as well, and he's got his own Eddie Bravo Invitational now too. But he said, look, I've had purple belts take my back. That happens. It's not Conor's jiu-jitsu. That's not the issue.
Yeah. But he did. I watched a bit of that clip, and he was saying that his jiu-jitsu is high level, and he got rocked. And again, he's like, and Diaz is legit. It's I think it's, it's, you can't, people, I don't know whether they need to take away from Conor rather than giving Diaz his props for how well he did.
Because it's an insult to Diaz as well. I mean, he's never really earned decent money in the UFC up until this fight.
I was shocked though that he was like his fight before that. He was only 40.
And they were like, but Nick, his brother was the same up until the Anderson Silva fight. Yeah. Where they were both like, fuck it.
And now they're showing that I think they released stuff today saying it's tracking at over 1.3 million boys.
It's saying we just did a story, between 1.5 and 1.6.
So the biggest ever.
Well, it's saying it's either the biggest ever, like Dana White says that after,
because
it's like with every Conor one, it's probably close.
Yeah.
And then I think Australia with the Ronda Rousey Holly Holm fight might have been the nearest. But yeah, he's saying it's the biggest ever, and if it's not the biggest ever, it's just under. So, but I think it's some more.
And considering there was 2 fights on that card.
Yeah, there really was. I mean, there were some good fights early on in the card. I liked Sanchez is always kind of fun to watch as well, and Miller, I like watching him. But yeah, in terms of broader appeal.
Yeah, considering 189 and 194 were stacked cards. Like these were just okay cards, and
there'd been that kind of worldwide global trip. Aldo press tour, and there'd been a change of opponent, and this is Conor's kryptonite and all that shit. So, and that's one of the best things I think about Conor from a business perspective for Dana White and for the Fertittas and for the UFC in general is that he said at that press conference last year and called out everyone. Dana was able to sell a fight with anybody.
The thing is that if Dos Anjos was fit and would fight him, what day are we take? Friday. Tomorrow, Conor would fight him. It's like that's. Like, he loves fighting. He would get in there and fight him. He's no problem with that.
There was never an issue of him turning down the fight. There was never an issue with the replacement when Mendes came in for Aldo.
But like as they were saying earlier, is that but it always happens. Like Gunny was the same. The amount of times I think of his, I think he's 16, 17 professional fights. I think the opponent hasn't changed 4 or 5 times. That's it.
It has happened to Gunny a lot now that you
again, it's like, what's the point in preparing for one particular guy when most likely it will change? You know what I mean? And because of the amount of professionals in SBG, you are preparing for all body types just with your normal training as well. So I don't know. Like, again, it's that area is way more John Kavanagh and Conor's area. So if they feel they need to bring in more people, or they're happy with the guys that are there, because the guys that are there and that are coming through are amazing. Like,
there's some big names coming through there, or there's going to be big names,
and it's amazing as well. As like John has been getting a little bit of stick like over it, but like I think John is probably the best coach in the UFC. Like, if you look at, John is from Dublin. Nearly every fighter he's put in the UFC is from Dublin. So he's recruiting from...
So it's the most part, it has been fighters that have come to SBG from...
That he's taken from not having... Like, Cahill, no MMA experience. Paddy started in the beginner's jiu-jitsu class. It wasn't like he came in... I'm not sure. I think Ash might have done kickboxing or something beforehand. Conor came from boxing, but had no MMA experience. So John took him through his amateur career, his professional career, to win a belt in the UFC. Gunny had never done jiu-jitsu when John started working.
He's a maestro now. Yeah,
and it's like, and then Artem as well. I know Artem's Russian, but I think he's in Dublin since he's 15. He had never done any of those things.
He's a ballroom dancer.
Yeah.
He's light on his feet, but that obviously with footwork and stuff.
So like John is taking these guys. It's not like the bigger camps. Like you look at, say, Team Alpha Male. They've won 1 belt. And they recruit from around the States. They're based in Sacramento, and a few of the guys are local, but they recruit from all over the States.
Black Zillions are the same, in Florida.
AT&T, I think, have only won the belt with Lawler. I think that was their first belt. So you see these teams that have been there since AT&T have been there a long time. UFC, Team Alpha Male are there a long time before them with WEC, and like SBG in Dublin, recruiting mainly from Dublin, has won a UFC belt. It's amazing. Like when you look at it like that, it's incredible.
Getting people in at that age to take up the sport when nobody really knew what the sport was, and it's not that long ago. Like Owen Roddy's 32 or 33. Like no one's retired. Like, and he's considered the old guard. Like. Yeah,
but it's amazing that from when we started working with them, it was like we're doing this to win UFC belts.
That was always the goal.
That was John Kavanagh's. That's what we're doing from day one. We're not here to just. We're here to progress through the Irish belts, through the European scene, to the international scene, to the UFC, to win belts. That's the only reason we're doing this. And from the very start, as I said, 2009, that's what we were about. And it's amazing to see that to come to fruition. And of course, you're fighting at the highest level. There's going to be setbacks.
Yeah.
And it's I learned the phrase from John. It's you win or you learn, and we're going to learn from Saturday and move on. And we're going through a bad run. But again, it's going to get better, and
everybody loves a comeback story.
A comeback story is way more interesting,
and it was again it comes back to how Conor has handled the whole thing.
Yeah,
and it's how generally the SBG guys handle losing when they lose, and maybe the Irish guys in general, but any fighter or anybody at that level in any sport, when they show humility, when they're that good at what they do. I think
that's why a lot of people didn't like him in the first place, is because the Irish mentality is you have to show humility before it. Rather than you can't show confidence. But
that's what got him the UFC contract, dinner with Dana White, and then clipping somebody in 60 seconds, 67 seconds.
Yeah, that's what propelled him to where he is now. And it's it's only going to be better from here. Like he's going to continue breaking records. He's going to win the lightweight belt. You know,
because people now there is that doubt now. I mean, there is that.
Of course,
doubt,
there's a doubt, which makes it even more interesting.
The detractors have that, what they believe to be context now. They've been like, it's Jits, he was on the ground, he's in trouble.
Chad Mendes took him down, but like
he spun Chad Mendes like off.
But he couldn't train because of his knee. His sparring, he did very little sparring.
He couldn't wrestle at all.
Couldn't wrestle at all. So, and Chad Mendes is one of the best wrestlers in the UFC. So, you know what I mean? When you fight at the highest level, everything has to be.
But even then, it was a case of not giving Conor credit for the win because Mendes only had whatever camp and Diaz only had whatever camp.
Conor didn't have a full camp.
Yeah.
Either.
But he doesn't make excuses. He doesn't come out and say that. That stuff kind of comes out after.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, my knee wasn't 100%. And like kind of John saying that when Conor went in for the Mendes fight, he was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Yeah. Because he knew his knee was far from 100%.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I mean. And he's willing to take those risks and he's willing to step forward. And it's, as I said, he loves to fight and he's going to get in there. It's amazing how his last fight, he knocked out someone in 13 seconds that, hadn't been beaten in 10 years. Is Aldo only other loss a submission or was it a decision?
I think it might have been a decision, but it was over 10 years ago now, but at the time it was...
he went out, knocked him out, and he's...
Well, but Aldo
and it's almost forgotten. It's like...
But with Aldo as well, it was like Aldo pulled out of a lot of fights. He didn't fight as much as Conor fights. Conor fought in December, in the middle of December. Yeah. Because he fought in July. Like a lot of champions will kind of sit back. You've seen it with Verdum now.
Like that's what I find mad is that Aldo wants to fight in July, but Aldo would only fight once a year.
Yeah.
So I would actually, again, I've no say over this, but I'd rather see Conor fight Edgar.
Yeah.
Because
what do you think happens there? Like Edgar fought Faber.
Conor wins by knockout.
Yeah, but this is what I think, because now all of a sudden, Edgar's decided to shit talk and his manager shit talk from around. I love Frank Edgar. I think he's a phenomenal fighter. I love watching him. I love watching Mark Henry's fighters in general because I just think the pace is just burns on him. I would love to see that fight, but at the same time, people said that before. People said it about Mendes. This is the kryptonite. This is it. And then Edgar fought Faber. And Faber, they seem to neutralise each other.
John Calvin says it's always the question. So when he beat Mendes, it was the wrestler with the heavy hands. But now it's Edgar who's as elite a wrestler, but is better boxing. Doesn't have the heavy hands. I know he knocked Mendes out, but
Mendes wasn't right after. So soon after Conor knocking him out in July.
From that, yeah. We were coming back from Artem's fight. We were on the same bus, and as Mendes, he was distraught. Like you could just see, he was like, oh, "Where do I go from here?"
Yeah,
like it's amazing. Like when people dislike other fighters or something like that, but they're all very similar guys. They're all like as you found out filming Barbaric Gentlemen. They're all nice guys who they're just following a dream, and it just happens to be fighting.
Yeah,
and
it's even recent was something on the Late Late Show there recently, and it's the most frustrating thing I find now because like I said, I'm training all the time and I see the guys and I see what they put in and how these aren't aggressive people, but the fact that this question is constantly been raised. And there was a guy in the Late Late Show and he's put up and I know Ryan Tuberty's an MMA fan. You can tell Ryan's an MMA fan. He knows his shit. He doesn't just come out with stuff. He's very much educated on it. You can tell he watches the sport. And there was a picture of Van Zandt. Now, it was a bad picture. It was for Pictures of the Year or something like that. Okay. And the guys from the agency put a picture of Van Zandt when she got beaten.
Covered in blood.
Covered in blood. And he's like, no, I don't agree with that now at all. I don't, or whatever now.
Who?
It was the guy that was showing the pictures, just randomly gave his opinion on it.
Was it his picture?
No, it was just like, whatever about that. And then he went to a GAA picture, he went to something else. And I think Ryan Tuberty just kind of went, well, now a lot of people disagree with you there, but anyway, as if to say.
Okay, so one of the images I have of growing up watching football was Terry Butcher. Do you remember that image of
the elbow? Was it?
He was wearing the white England jersey, which was red by the time he was coming off.
Richard Dunn recently against Russia.
And there's that it happens in so many sports. I know they will take them off, but it is fighting. But they're protected.
And it is a case of it looks bad when there's that much blood involved and it's in a cage or it's in a knockdown.
But I think as well as it's different in MMA because a lot of times I think with cuts it's from elbows. So your elbow is quite sharp. So when it cuts it can be very superficial, and a lot of it is it just it can basically.
That's what they have to cut men in the corner for. Yeah,
it can basically piss blood as a result. But like it's not as bad as it looks,
and it's trying to explain it. And look, certain people just aren't going to be into it, and that's fine. But then there was something else recently. It was on Ireland AM, and one of the sports guys asked some old football journalist, like this guy's in his 60s, late 60s, what he thought of him. And I was like, why? Who cares what he thinks? Yeah. Sonia Sullivan is an incredible athlete and an Irish legend, an Irish sporting legend. But she was given a platform then to talk about him. Why?
But I think as well, it's if you don't like violence, fine.
Because it's fighting.
If you're trying to argue for health injuries, you're going to ban way more sports before you ban it.
I've gotten from, and I've by no means competed at elite level than anything, but and I've fucked up my body more from ultramarathons than I have from anything else, and a few marathons and ultramarathons that I've ran than I have for anything
knees,
else.
Low backs.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you take shots and eat shots. It's all superficial for the most part.
But like, say for instance, the Dublin, like a lot of people, if you see people running, most of them are speed limping. They're just, they're just struggling along, and a lot of times you look at them and go, "Oh my God, you're doing so much damage to your body." Like that's one of the reasons why I prefer lifting weights, because I can modify everything that you're getting a result, but you're safe. Yeah. Like of course, over years, and when people push it, any sport you take to the extreme, the top level, you have to make sacrifices, and one of those is you have to sacrifice your health a little bit to become elite. Yeah. Now, in MMA is the same as other sports, but as far as other sports go, there's a lot worse sports than MMA. I think like John Kavanagh posted a link to a study where it was like for marathon runners, how many of them die, from collapsing after a marathon, and some people would be like, but that's just, shit, they shouldn't have done that. Like you think of like now with is a safe MMA and these people coming on board in the UK.
It's properly been regulated. The medical side of it is properly been regulated.
You show up to do a marathon. What medical check do you have to do? Yeah. None. You can just show up, go for it, mate. And it's like, I think MMA is a lot safer than, again, it looks worse than it is.
And well, even now, even in terms of training and stuff, people aren't sparring as heavy anymore. Robbie Lawler doesn't really spar. People are very much learning. They're leaving the wars for the octagons. Yeah. But I worked with a guy who's a professional rugby player. And he still played recreationally then. He was in his 30s and he'd retired. He played for Leinster and he played in Toulon, stuff like that. And he retired. And he would come in the UK odd time from just playing recreationally. He'd have his nose be out here or his eye be out here, wherever. He'd never say that. And he's a fucking hard bastard. But I remember him saying, I came in, my nose broken in training. And I came in and it was a bit like my eyes were a bit whatever. That's what happens when you break your nose.
No one asked you what happened today.
Exactly.
People avoid it in case you got jumped on and then they have to give you pity.
Yeah, you do the whole story. But David said to me, he was like, I said, how many concussions have you had? He was like, 12. 12. He had 12, but he had scans because he played professional rugby for so long. And he's small for a rugby player. He's like 5'10". And he said, but I've had scans, I'm fine. Like, so it's obviously checked and it's looked at. But he had 12. Wow. Like, registered.
Have you seen what footballer was it recently had one concussion and retired? Because he was.
Well, you're jumping up to get a football, especially for a centre half or something like that. Whatever speed that football is moving, it might be light, but that impact is.
That's why I played in goal.
But the goalies were always ones that were in a better shape, though, aren't they? You see that now, like.
Depends.
Well, it looks the goal. Look at me with the goalies. There was a Van der Sar plays for United. Goalies always look shredded. They always have that kind of like. Now their Fraser Foster's like 6'7". Yeah, that wasn't you, no.
Yeah, I don't know. No, that wasn't. Well, at the time it was, but I was skinny as fuck. But but it's like I have 2 kids. If they came to me and they said, "I'm going to play," I don't want to get injured as much. I want to do MMA or rugby. I would say do MMA. Now I love rugby. Rugby's a great sport, but it's hard on the body. It's like Cottle will tell you the team he played for. I think 4 of them went professional. And 3 of them are retired now. In their late 20s. Like, they're not even into their 30s. They're retired through injury.
Is it now
in their late 20s?
That technology and kind of known how to avoid injuries is going to get better? Or is it that it plays the opposite effect where people know when to stop?
It could be. I think as well as it's more a case of people are just getting bigger and stronger. So they're able to hit harder. And the human body isn't able to take as much... in so if like your strength is here and your ability to take a shot is here. If the strength goes here, your ability to take a shot doesn't increase at the same level. So for people who are listening to this, have no idea. Like, but yeah, so it's
no, but it's like when Ireland play back-to-back games, and they're a particularly tough game the week before the England game, and like that's heavy shit. The tackles are coming in, and your body's in shock.
Like, I have to say, like, they're warriors.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
These guys are like, and they're like, it's funny as well because when you weigh in at very low body fat for MMA. And most of the rugby guys, like, I worked with Jerry Flannery for a long time, and Fla was shredded, absolutely shredded, but he was like 12% body fat. Yeah,
but I think as well is that there's a certain certain people, when they drop below a certain percentage of body fat, they're more prone to, they're not able to take shots as much. So I think sometimes you find with guys, even though they don't look that lean maybe on the scales, and they move up a weight class, and all of a sudden they can start eating shots, like taking shots and moving through them. I think there's something in that, and I think with the rugby guys, they probably through trial and error have found that it's like, oh no, when I get too lean,
because the rugby players, look, since the sport's gone professional, like
monsters.
When you look at, like, you know I know it's completely different positions, I get that, but if you look at like Keith Wood or Will Carling, and you look at Johnny Wilkinson and look at the evolution of what the players, like Johnny Wilkinson was absolutely shredded. He looked like a male model, like.
he was in good nick. But again, it's bringing it to the next level. But say for instance in MMA, right, now judging off the UFC, as you go up in weight class, knockouts increase. You
hit harder,
as I said, but you hit harder, but the human frame can't take as much. So it's like, yes, you get much stronger.
Many heavyweight fights go the distance. Like, it's very few.
And if they do, a lot of the time they're horrible to
it's
look
just
at.
overhands, just kind of fucking windmilling, like.
But it's so it's as you go up, and that's the thing, is these rugby players are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and stronger and stronger and stronger, and the human frame can take those shots. And like the guys that can, fair play to them. Like, it's amazing when you see it. It's funny though. So I'm surrounded by MMA and boxing, and I go to loads of events. But like sometimes when I go to hurling and watch that, I get a bit afraid from that, because it's like they're hitting each other with sticks. Like, my sister-in-law plays for Dublin seniors and has captained them, and I think she's broken 9 of her fingers. So like, I know it's not head trauma, but like, it's still like every sport.
It's a superficial. Wound.
Every sport has its injuries. Like, but yeah, from MMA, I'd say, like, of course the headshots. But like, so say for instance, where Conor got rocked, if that was boxing, he could have tied up Diaz. You know, a little bit.
Or he could have gotten a standing 10 count or whatever it was.
He could have gone down, recovered a little bit, grabbed him, ran around a little bit, got back to his corner, sat down, recovered. Where in MMA you can just swarm, and you know, and that's so short term. You know, you're probably taking more damage, but over an entire fight, you're probably taking less damage. So if people can take boxing, then you definitely take MMA. And it's like, no one is forcing these guys to do it either. Like, they a lot of them know the risks going in, and you know, they accept them and go forward. But again, as you said, probably early warning signs will improve. How to measure it for the concussion and stuff like that. So if there's any sign of stuff starting, then they'll be gone. Like, I think in the UFC, you've got to, I don't know whether it's definitely with safe MMA, I think you have to get a brain scan once a year. The UFC, you might have to get a brain scan
like
every fight.
on the blood tests and everything, you have to go to your doctor, you have to be cleared to fight before you can actually fight. So if you don't, and this is amateur, so he's like, if you haven't had your tests, you're not going to be able to fight.
Which is and I think it's like a lot of people say, oh, it's unregulated because it's new. It is getting people regulated.
People still think UFC is a sport in a lot of areas, and it is a case of educating. But we'll finish up soon, but before we do, I always find that when there's big success in one sport, kids gravitate towards that sport. So kind of around our age, it was Italian 90. You know, it was like, I was like 7 when that was on, or 8 or something when Italian 90 happened, and then 94 in the US, and it was like Robbie Keane and Damien Duff in many ways, and Richard Dunn and Shay Given went out into the field and picked up a football, and then just had that mindset that they got to the level that they got to. Do you see that happening with MMA? Do you think, like, MMA or at this level, at this focus on, obviously Conor brings a certain element that nobody else in the world ever has, really, you know, Ronda Rousey maybe, but she never had a whole country behind her. But do you see MMA? Do you see younger athletes continuing to gravitate towards MMA? Do you see the future being bright for Irish MMA fighters?
Oh, amazing! It's in in SBG they call it the Growing Gorillas program, and there's so many at that. So like, Owen Roddy's opening up an MMA club in our gym in Malahide Marina, and one of our main focuses is going to be the kids program. And it's amazing when people, you can't have kids doing this stuff, but it teaches them amazing discipline. Like, you know yourself, when you're humbled by people rolling or sparring, it just knocks all that anger out of you, because when you're out in the street and it's just like, I don't need to prove myself.
Yeah.
I know where I'm at.
It's not an insecurity thing at all.
Because a lot of people who get into fights are insecure people.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you train any martial art, you become more secure in yourself. You realise what level you're at. You're like, well, if I want to fight, I'll have a proper sanctioned fight, or I'll have a proper sparring section with someone who's at my level, and I can learn and progress. And you take that out of it. Like, and I think kids gravitating towards martial arts is brilliant. And one of the biggest things in the SBG, I think it's the Growing Gorillas program is the respect part of it. And it's stuff like, I think they implemented a program where it's like, if you don't do your schoolwork, you're not allowed to do the class. So they really, and you have to do homework for the class as well. So it's like, if you don't bring that in,
you're going to learn about it as well.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. It's like, and it's simple stuff, of course, but you still have to do it. You have to learn.
The kids have to apply themselves.
You have to learn that dedication, that and you have to constantly show up and do. And it's brilliant to do. Like and like martial arts for kids at a young age to do, just for coordination and flexibility, and as I said, for their ego, to check their ego early is amazing. Because yourself, some like people think they're tough guys. They get levelled if they go to a proper club.
Well, I mean, that's it. And I did again a small insight into that 3 years ago. And I was saying it to Cole recently. I was like, I realised what I did, how fucking nuts what I did was now, because I've been training for a few years. I realise now how nuts that was.
Thank God you weren't training for a few years before you did it. You would never have done it.
Exactly. I'd have been like, ugh. No. I love the sport, and I will fight again once I stop aging. That just seems to be happening.
You figure out how to
just age backwards. Yeah, because I'm getting on. But like CM Punk is 38. And so, like, I'm curious to know what you think about that, because I had a very similar situation, and we put the documentary on YouTube, and it did really well, and the comments on Reddit were amazing. I'm like reading it behind kind of closed fingers, and a lot of people are kind of going, no, what I did was nuts. I wholly, completely, 100% hold my hands up. It was nuts. I thought it made for a really good documentary that you were part of, and Owen and John and Conor and Dana White and everybody, which was an amazing experience. Wouldn't change it for the world. I will train variations of this sport until close to the day I die. I would hope to see. But I've had a fucking complete and utter brain fart now.
About CM Punk.
Yeah, about CM Punk, sorry. So what I did was nuts, but CM Punk fighting in the UFC, going in at that level, and Mickey Gall, who he's supposed to fight.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like a fucking pushover. Like, I mean, he looks... He's had one pro fight. He's had one fight in the UFC.
In some ways, you really have to, because now you've been through exactly the same things. You really have to admire the fact he's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it happen. But
like, I had a focus, but the focus he has on him is like,
it's crazy. It's insane. And that's what I mean. It's like, you have to even admire it more because of that.
Yeah.
Because of the pressure, because of the comments, and it's kind of like, just let him do it. Get on with it. Like, maybe like
if he gets battered, he gets battered. But
like, Brock was like a national champion.
He's a freak of nature athlete.
Freak of nature. And CM Punk is coming in with no martial arts experience to do it. But like, fair play to him. Like, I think he probably needed to just retire from wrestling, train with the goal in his mind, and maybe do one or two local shows and then go right. Because the UFC would have, if he'd had one fight, the UFC would have gone, right, he's had a fight, let's bring him in.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it was like they did it this way because, if you're out of the public eye for too long, you're forgotten about, especially with wrestling.
And he's not getting, like, he's like 38. He's like, and his body at a certain point in wrestling.
But I think that's what's happening. I think he, his body can't keep up with it. Like, he's, I don't know exactly what the back injury is, but if it's requiring surgery, it's.
But that was kind of nuts because he was talking about, he wanted to fight as soon as, and then The 2 days later.
Yeah, he must have known. Because I think they squared off in the cage on the Saturday.
Yeah, and then on the Monday.
The surgery on it. So he knew, but I don't know. So,
so it's kind of a case of, like, he's got fucking balls.
Yeah.
But don't be talking shit to Cole Pounders because that wouldn't end well.
Yeah. Call it murder. But, like, you have to, like, fair play to him for wanting to do it. But I think as well as with the comment with Cahill and him, it was more, I don't think he understood Irish humour. Like, Cahill was
taking the piss out of himself.
It
was about him hitting the pads.
Yeah, it was like he was taking the piss out of both of them.
Yeah.
But CM Punk just seen it as an insult. So, but again, it got a
bit of attention.
It got a bit of attention for both of them, and that's a huge part of the fight game.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times in other sports, it's the final is the most important thing. But in boxing and MMA, you have to build a fight. Like, I think with Frampton versus Quigg was so big because it took so long to happen. And because it took so long to happen, it just built up. The two of them had really successful careers away from each other. And then when it finally came together, the first half of the fight made for very compelling boxing. And the second half of the fight was an amazing amazing brawl. So, but it wouldn't have made as much money for them, and it wouldn't have been as big excitement if it happened a few years ago. And there was no animosity between the two of them.
It was a cracking fight. And one of the judges had it to Quigg.
I don't know how. Now, I'm biased towards Frampton, but I was like, he has 7 or 8 rounds there.
Yeah.
Like in the first 7 rounds, Frampton won 6 of them easy, and then after that, and then he probably won the 12th. And then after that, the rest of the rounds were really close, so they could have gone, either way. I haven't watched the fight back, but like he definitely had 7 rounds. He might have had 8. So like when the first judge called it 116, 112, I was like, 8 rounds to 4, perfect. And I was like 117 to 113. I was like, okay, that's the Frampton as well. And I was like Quigg, and you're like, fuck. And then the last judge scored at 116 to 112, which was 8 rounds to 4. So I think, but like Frampton and his camp, none of them have come out. They kind of said I felt I was winning, but I've no problem with the fact Carl won it because they know he won it.
So I think we'll finish up there. And for anybody who's listening to this and maybe not watching it, you're the guy who's holding the belt, Carl's belt in the ring.
That
and
belt is so heavy, like it's gold. It's so. And anytime the camera would turn away from me, I'd bring my arms down. Oh man, that belt is so heavy.
You got some gains. You got to chase your gains even when you're out watching your mate.
But your
fight.
arms are pumped down when the camera does come on you. Pity they're so white.
The veins are popping.
Yeah.
Well, John Connor, look, man, thanks so much for coming in. It was like an absolute education to me. Back then, it's still like an ongoing education to me with the conditioning and stuff.
I'm still learning every day.
But even when like I went into you recently and I was like, I don't know how to deadlift. Show me how to deadlift.
Yeah.
And you broke down the semantics of deadlift, and most people it looks like just picking up a weight. It really isn't. And I fucked up my back from doing it wrong.
Yeah.
From wearing running shoes, deadlifting, or something ridiculous like that. It was a case, and you were just very simple. This is how you do it. I'm not going to go into it, but this is how you do it. Lean a certain way. Whatever, don't wear running shoes.
Yeah.
So it's a constant education to me, and I think anybody that's any interest whatsoever.
Cushion shoes.
Cushion shoes. But anybody who's got any interest whatsoever, I think in not just MMA or boxing, but strength and conditioning, or kind of wants to get healthier or wants to feel better.
But as I said, the majority of what we do is general population. Again, we train a lot of professional fighters, but the majority of what we do is...
So there's a gym on Leeson Street?
We have a gym on Leeson Street, a gym in Artane.
That's where you are? That's
where I am. And then we've...
You might see Conor McGregor pushing a sleigh.
Yeah, in the car park. And then we've a gym in Malahide Marina as
Great.
well.
And that one's just recently opened?
No, 3 years it's open.
3 years?
We recently moved.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, we moved in... We were in the same unit. We just moved to a bigger... Or in the same block, a bigger unit within that block. And then we supplied the strength and conditioning area in SBG Concord.
So if anybody's into that big space and sees all that stuff there, and you're still rolling yourself too all the time.
I'm hoping I'll get me purple belt this year. So
that's no mean feat. How long are you doing jits now?
5 years next month. Yeah,
I'm doing 3 years and I'm still shit. Anyway.
Some days, I'll tell you what, some days you feel like this is going nowhere.
And then you catch somebody
today is a day I was like, I'm amazing, and then tomorrow I could feel like crap again.
You don't know where a choke is coming from.
Yeah.
But we'll throw a link into the site, and we'll throw a link to your Facebook into the article as well. So John, thanks so much for coming in, man.
No problem, Mike.